A big welcome to the Nick Elston Show, hosted by inspirational speaker and transformational speaking coach Nick Elston. This show brings you the people who inspire, motivate, educate, and engage in all walks of life, sharing their insights and experiences honestly, unfiltered, and off script. So, without further ado, let's get stuck into today's show.
Hey everyone, and a big welcome back to the Nick Elston Show, Season 4, Episode 6. And I remembered the name of the show this time. Always useful, especially when it's your own name. There we go. Anyway, moving on. Today we have another amazing guest to bring you. Genuinely one of my favourites. We have the lovely Alex Bond-Burnett. Big round of applause.
Oh, thank you. Hello. Thank you. No, thank you for having me. Thanks for having me here.
Communications guru, speaker, and coach extraordinaire. Tell us all, who are you, where you're from, and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I feel like I'm on, was it Surprise, Surprise?
Yeah.
Date, wasn't it? What's your name and where'd you come from?
You haven't seen him in 30 years.
Yes, anyone who's under the age of 30 probably has no idea what I've just said. Google it. That's the answer.
Google it.
Anyway, yes, as you just said, so I work with communication, and basically my whole ethos, my whole kind of raison d'etre is to help people become incredible communicators and people leaders in such a way that works with who they are and what they value. So it's not about, a lot of the time it's teaching communication can be, this is how you do it, and this is a framework. But no, my purpose there is to actually go, we are all great communicators anyway. It's just sometimes we've formed some habits that don't sit with who we are as a person. So that's what I do. And I do that predominantly at finance, tech, accounting, fintech space.
I like that. We've gone deep quite quickly on the old communication front. I like that. That's really cool. And where are you from? Where are you from in the world, Alex?
Well, I'm in East Sussex, so in the UK, in my lovely office here. So yeah, I'm in the southeast of England.
Excellent. Good stuff. So where should we go first? See, knowing you, I just think like there's so many people that be really interested in what you do. Where do we go first? Why the financial sector? Why the accountancy sector? Why did you focus in on that? Is that from where you're from originally? Yeah,
do you know what? I have quite, I say a funny background, but really, so it was always very intuitive for me to go into, so I got like an accounts assistant job leaving school. And I was always very good at school at two things. Like there were three core subjects that I was like excellent at. And they say, don't you, you've got to really focus on your strengths. But I was very confused because I had my strengths in, I was, top grades in maths, in sciences, apart from chemistry, awful there, and drama and music. And those are my top core subjects, and everything else I was kind of fairly mediocre at. And that stayed with me really. Of course, if you're faced off between sciences and maths and then music and drama, as a career choice, you can go a sensible way or a not so sensible way. And I come from a family of writers, performers, singers, songwriters, journalists. So very creative family. Didn't really know what never saw anyone who was in a profession. I didn't grow up that way. It was all very ad hoc. So not what I'd say is normal. So, of course, I rebelled and I went into accounting, which is the easy answer.
Rock and roll, that's it. That's the way to go.
If all of your family are kind of rock stars or something like that, then what you do is you rebel and you go and join some finance, work at a finance team.
It's like the reverse of a two-finger moment, isn't it? Yeah. No, I'm running off to join a band, and now I'm running off to be an accountant. There you go.
It is exactly that. But I tell you what, the thing is, though, I was a fairly geeky child. And do you know what? I was in a workshop this morning where one of the questions was, what's your alter ego? And I was like, oh my gosh, who is this? And I said, well, I'm afraid it is a mixture of probably Julie Andrews and and some sort of very nerdy geek girl. So those are probably, that mixture somewhere is my alter ego there. But no, so yeah, I worked in financial services, and I worked for I worked in corporate, and kind of grew into that and into different realms, and then project managing different things like payment services and stuff. So it was when I had a kind of life event when I was 22, 23. And that kind of made me stop and go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And is this really where I want to be? It's very cliche, really. I had managed to turn my car over and have this car crash, and it's kind of became the catalyst for a lot of those things that happen in your 20s at some point, when you go, what am I doing with my life? And at that point, I started work and put things in place, and it took a long while because you can't do these things easily or cheaply. But I decided that that's when I wanted to go to drama school and actually conform to my family. and so I did. And then I studied for 2 years, and then I did a further degree in theatre. But that's when I found what really, really interested me. So I did go to drama school. I did get acting diploma and a degree. And what fascinated me, though, was how we engage each other with our emotions, and like the amount of prep work that goes into putting on a performance is something that is carefully crafted into, well, what's my motivation? What are my values? Why are they doing this? Why are they behaving that way? And then there's the second thing of, how do we articulate this clearly and powerfully, and so it connects with a wide audience? So there was a lot there to learn. When I was then back into regular jobs as an actor, that's what you do, until you can audition. Then it was a case of, wow, this is really powerful in that world. So then I started working more in education. I worked for some universities, and it was more the why we do things, how we behave, and actually part of my studies ended up being performance outside of the theatre space. It was in an everyday street. How do we align ourselves when we see something happen, or how do the clothes we wear paint part of that picture? What happens in a meeting room when you have people in there? It's a part of performance. So that's how I led me
stuff. And you could show, you're quite right, and it's whether it's intentional or unintentional, like the cap and the beard thing. It's that it's kind of built a persona where I'll even get bookings on the base. Oh, you're the guy with the cap and the beard. It means I can never take it off and I can never shave ever again. But it becomes that kind of like you said, that performance kind of tool as a personal brand, isn't it? It's kind of what people have built up the expectation, the comfort with, the trust with, and that's what they expect to see when they get that in person. Yes, yeah, and and that can be really. We can do it deliberately, or I think we do a lot of things. Not even instinctively, but just out of habit. We don't even realize we're doing things. And yeah, the same can be with our outside clothing. But think about it this way. You're on a train platform somewhere, and there are several people near you, and you're already making judgments about who that person is. And all you know is that they're catching the same train as you. Really, that's the fact of the matter. But if someone's wearing tracksuit bottoms and someone else is wearing a suit, or someone else is wearing, flashy trainers and ripped jeans and a shirt, you're probably going to think they work for a fintech and they're a tech company or something. But you're what happens is, neurologically speaking, it fires off all these little things from your memory and from your what we know is unconscious bias, because it's things we've learned before, as in it's kind of like a programming. Does that make sense? Yeah, absolutely.
So we've had an experience, and it flags that up in the brain, and so often we're not aware of that.
It's fascinating stuff. And I think even looking into, weirdly enough, through last year, kind of I went through kind of counselling and therapy myself and revisited, actually, there's a really kind of, the reason why we do what we do. I always find that's a fascinating subject, and you allude to it so brilliantly, that you take, I mentioned the cap and the jeans, that kind of stuff is a thing, but actually probably rebelling against the fact for most of my career I had to wear a suit and tie and shirt and all those kind of different things. Probably also the fact that there's a really fine line between masking behavior, which I kind of actively discourage when it comes to kind of things like mental health, but can actually act as a mask as well, because you feel comfortable behind that persona. And you're quite right, the way I think it sounds really great on an Instagram post to say, don't judge people and be kind and that kind of stuff. But let's face it, we're all judging everybody. I'm judging you, you're judging me, everyone's judging everyone else. But I think there's a difference between we accepting that, and I think actually recognizing that we can judge without imprinting our beliefs on somebody else, isn't there?
Yes.
And that's a really strong point that you've made.
No, I was going to say that's a perfect way of saying it, is judging. You're always judging without imprinting, but it's imprinting your beliefs on someone else. That's the perfect way to say that.
And your time took in working as a theatrical coach for Disney as well. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
I was shouting about that if I were you. So modest.
I've well, a lot of the work that I used to do was working in education terms, so it's using drama as a tool for communication, and it's about using that to build confidence, to build an understanding of the world around, and also step into someone else's shoes. So it's about empathy, and it's about compassion, and it's about having that ownership over who you are. And I think that's the thing that kind of work does, is it's not just about, okay, let's have a great presentation or let's do some great public speaking. It's actually, I think the more that you work with people developing their speaking skills, and I'm not sure if you, because of course this is what you do as well, is that it's less about, there's the technique and that's fine. I think that's like the polish on the table.
Yeah.
But unless you know how that table is built and how robust it is, and you feel confident that that's going to stand up, and the polish, that's just the last thing. So it's about understanding what's going on with you and why you behave, what you value, what's important. So a lot of those things like speaking nerves, in my opinion anyway, and also feeling a lack of confidence and having that influence with other people isn't about manipulating others. It's about understanding yourself so well that you feel comfortable with any other person, and you can powerfully from that place then articulate what needs to be said, so that you can do justice and you can do service to the information that you're sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the difference between presenting and communication, isn't it? Is that you can present, you can be superficial in that sense, even that you put the polished version of you or whatever that may be, but by communicating actually is finding commonality and community with your audience, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, by using the things that we're discussing, showing vulnerability, authenticity, being able to look at how not only to manage your own emotional well-being whilst you're talking about stuff, but also to take into account the emotional well-being of your audience. It's kind of like I always say it's kind of like a flow, isn't it? And as a professional speaker in your own right, that we also have to be fully aware that, as I said, before we hit record, I'm running at about 80% today. I'm quite open about that. And I think you said the same. But the difference is that as performers, in that sense, as speakers, when we're stood up in front of people, it's kind of like there's an expectation to be at 100. And again, that's that fine line between masking and performance, isn't it? And my first keynote that I ever delivered as part of my therapy, really, I called it A Showman's Life. And it's after an amazing track by country artist called George Strait. Of course, it has to be country. It's me, isn't it? But he talks about kind of whatever's going on in his personal life and whatever challenges he's had and arguments and all this kind of different stuff that goes behind everybody. as soon as he stepped up to that spotlight, his audience demanded a performance. And that's an interesting balance to walk, isn't it? That's an interesting line that we both walk in front of our own audiences.
Yeah, and it's so funny. You're reminding me of something. I can't remember really what we called it, but in terms of being on stage, or if you're touring, there's this thing, I think we experience it a lot as well in the workplace, actually, which is when you stop, when you have a holiday or you break up for Christmas or something like that, then that's when you get sick. That's when when your body lets up. And it was the same thing. I actually had I had it where I did 2 shows one after the other, and they were one was in a theatre in London and the next was open air, and it was full on, the rehearsal show, because it literally didn't stop one after the other. And with the first show, I'd had some pains in my stomach, like on my side, which was my appendix, and I was like, oh, it'd be fine, it'll go away. We've got opening night next week, so this is not appropriate. It's not good. And I've got to be there. I've got to show up. I've got to be, I have to be of service in a sense. And there's something, I don't know. I'm usually quite pragmatic and quite, I like my science and everything, but there is something about the fact that you just go on and you do it. And it went away. So I figured it wasn't a big problem. And I did the next show. And I'm not kidding, like the day after that show closed, the open air one, I was then in the hospital. Mm. And I had my appendix went. So, and it was just like it held on. And I've been so sick before. But there is something of, that's a hugely extreme example. But there is something to say that when you show up, and I think it's that mindset switch. Different thing.
Mindset's a great word, by the way. We should use that. We should copyright that. Mindset.
That's what you get when you're scared of public speaking, is a mind sweat. And yeah, but then if when you approach these things being of service, and that's the communication piece that you're just saying, is that you're there to help someone else. I find that's the biggest switch for someone, is that if you're focused on what's happening for that other person, and if they're getting what they need out of the situation, and even enjoying themselves, depending on what the situation is, then everything falls away from you and you become a much better communicator.
I think that's where the energy management and the emotional management comes into any form of performance, or, like you said, being in front of an audience of any type. It is such a big focus for both of us in terms of how we help people with their stuff, and allowing your stuff to flow through you as opposed to from you. Because I know when I go to from you mode, I will collapse very quickly, like you said, afterwards. And I get that completely. What I love about what we do is that we kind of work in the same space. We come at things at a beautifully synergistic angle. It's crazy. We've run workshops together. I've brought you in on my own events as well. And I like that, because we kind of know our niches. We know our stuff. We know the context on why we're there. As you know, I focus a lot on emotional storytelling. And actually, you work in a sector where you are kind of a pioneer, I guess, that you're delivering more emotion into what is traditionally a sector where emotion's been really tough to show.
Yes. And, it's been a real journey for me to explain why that's so important. Because, I mean, even the ACCA, which is one of the accounting bodies, it was in 2015. They have 9 core competencies for being an accountant or a finance director or CFO, and one of those, it was only in 2015 they added in EQ, emotional quotient or emotional intelligence, as some know it, and it's been thinking about, like, well, why is that important for me? And I think it's because of that double journey that I've had, where I've seen both sides of being in a creative industry, but also a very, and I worked a lot with technology as well, because of the projects that I was doing with some of the bigger companies. And it was, so many mistakes could have been saved had there been more awareness about behavior and about how our frustrations and our energies are affected, and actually being able to, as you just said, like emotionally storytell in a sense as we connect. And more people have started, to really tie into this, because even when you're pitching for investment, for instance, you're convincing someone to trust you. When you're presenting or having a meeting or a difficult conversation at work, you are having to get them to trust you and
Absolutely.
understand you. And you also have to come over your biases. For instance, so many people have this, and especially if you've gone in that corporate sector, the loudest, most, confident, we have a very clear image of almost what a CEO would look like, or what someone successful will look like. And if you look up the hashtag executive presence on Instagram, you can see all these kind of pictures of people in sharp suits and looking very, very suave and with their Rolexes. And absolutely, that probably is them as well. But that isn't always what it looks like. And that doesn't mean if you don't look like that, that can't be you. So this is what I mean about finding your own way. If you need time to think about something, it's about finding a way to manage that space when someone asks you a question in a meeting, so that you don't look like you're not contributing, but you can say, I need to think about this.
This show is sponsored by Forging People, Transformational Speaking Coaching. Are you truly being heard in life, in business, in education, even at home? Your ability to deliver any message with clarity, power, and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success as a speaker, leader, and influencer. For more information, contact team@forgingpeople.com. Are you truly being heard? It's time to find your voice.
So I find it interesting that those kind of the big reactions, the stuff that you've done since, came from that big action of your sliding doors moment, that big kind of life event. And I continue to this day to find those events that are different for different people. You know about mine, my audience knows about mine. You've shared yours. We've had some really powerful examples on recently that without that big life event, actually maybe the most exciting things today wouldn't be happening. And that's phenomenal. That blows your mind when you think about it, isn't it? And I think for me, that's where speaking as a generalism comes into its own. Your ability to deliver any message to any audience will have an ultimately defining impact on your success, by your own definition of that word, by the way. And so actually being able to speak with clarity and power and emotion, to be able to find community and commonality in an audience, although it is a skill and it's great to have, actually I would argue it's essential to have, if you want to truly live a life or have an education or run a business on your terms.
Absolutely, especially running a business or working in any type of, to be honest, where you have to get people on board to work with you and to do things. And not only that, we're also leaving behind a place in a world, I believe, that where we've had a digital revolution in the way that we work, and we're leaving the trails behind of the Industrial Revolution, where it had to be 9 to 5, and it had to be in the office, and it had to be, and it was all very inflexible. Now we've got this world which is open to us, and that's been only accelerated by the pandemic. And it means that actually it's a lot about those relationships. And I see so much being said about like how technical ways of working make us less connected. And that can be true. We're not in a room together, you and I. We're not speaking face to face, but we are speaking, and we might not have got that opportunity before, being where you are and where I am.
Yeah.
And I've spoken with so many more people across the world. And I think if we give it the space and we lean into it, we can have much better, more productive and meaningful conversations. And business-wise, it makes more sense as well. We get a huge amount more ROI when we understand how people work emotionally.
So that's an interesting one as well, because I must admit, I'll hold my hands up, and I've said this before already on this season. I'll ask questions if I don't understand something. And I find it quite difficult to really focus on who I'm engaging with in a group environment when it comes down to seeing or trying to work out who's a different character type and stuff. And I know you're an amazing person at this, and you know lots of stuff. How important is it to consider these things when you are coaching people? I guess especially one-to-one, that makes more sense. But in a group environment, how can you kind of adjust what you do to create the same impact you want to deliver, whilst taking on board that there could be different character types in the room?
Oh, that's a big question. Well, I think it's hugely important. The first thing I do when working with someone is actually get them to take a DISC personality assessment, and it's a bit of a bad name for it, and as well it's a profile. And what that really means is that it's a snapshot of how that person behaves in that moment when they're answering the questions, because that's how it works. It also is important to know that any personality assessment in that sense is a snapshot, but it was also changeable. So the me that you're seeing right now won't be the same as probably when I'm putting my son to bed later, or so there's a whole breadth of who I am.
Oh wow, it's actually changeable on that kind of micro level as well.
There are micro levels of change. So and equally so a DISC will look at who you are in three ways. It actually gives you three things to look at. One is who you perceive yourself to be, which is very different from the you that you show other people. And then there's what we call the core self. So and sometimes that's said as being under stress, like who you are at your core when you're under pressure as well. So it measures all of that and shows you who you really are and who you're changing yourself to be as well, which can be dramatically different. But yes, it does change. I actually found one of my old DISC reports from about 10 years ago, and mine has dramatically changed.
What are you now?
I'm still complex, Nick. I'm still complex. Okay, so DISC works on 4 quadrants of personality. If anyone's ever done Insights, you might have heard of that. It's the same, essentially. But you've got your red, which is Insights, which is also DISC, which is dominant. You've also got I for influence, which is, I think it's called sunshine yellow when it comes to Insights. And then you've also got steadiness and conscientiousness. So the first two are what we know as outgoing personalities. They are happy, they're high energy. However, one side is task focused, that's the dominant, so very results driven, practical, analytical, just wants to know what's the bottom line, what am I here to do. And the other one, which I am, is optimistic, quite lively, very very apt if you're going to go and dance around on stage somewhere. And so I'm very much people focused as well. The other two, one is steadiness, which is kind of loyal, humble, but very reserved, and people focused as well. And the other one is conscientiousness, which is where I work a lot of the time, because it's dealing with people who are analytical, precision driven, and very, again, task focused, but also reserved. And funnily enough, I am both an I and a C, which is quite unusual.
Wow,
so I'm outgoing and people focused, but also task focused and reserved.
I like that. And in my employed career, when I first had a DISC profile, kind of DISC assessment, I was I towards the D, and then about a year ago, I was I towards the S, actually. So I kind of shifted down towards the S as I've gone on through my own stuff. So that's an interesting one too.
Yeah, that is. And we do shift though. That's the thing. And well, that's the whole purpose, isn't it? And we can only change situations if we change ourselves.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally believe, I mean, at my core, I fundamentally believe that people can and do change if they want to.
Yeah.
And I believe in rehabilitation. I've seen it happen. So at the core of what I do, yes, I believe we can change who we are. But when it comes to, back to your original question, when it comes to communicating, it is important to know some of these things, because you want different things from information. And different personalities bring other things out of your personality as well. So you've got a little bit of chemistry, which is what we call it, don't we? You have chemistry with someone.
Very true.
And so a lot of problems, conflicts I see, is when you've got someone who is quite reserved and needs to take their time with information, and is what we call, it's called slow thinking, but it doesn't mean as in you're slow to think. It means sometimes we just need a bit more time to evaluate, get evidence. Maybe you like a process, you have to get there. But that's a huge strength. And someone who's a D is usually very quick thinking, very instinctive, just wants to know what the end, don't tell me how you got there, I just want to know. And they're very speedy in that sense. So the two of them conversing together, that can have a lot of problems, because you've got the person who just needs a bit of time, maybe wants to go over how's your holiday, how's your weekend, to be warmed up into it. The other person just going, don't even say hello, just tell me what's going on. Tell me. And so on the one hand, that person's getting annoyed because they don't want to waste any time, and they want to get straight to the point because their time is valuable. And on the other hand, the person is saying, oh, are you angry with me? Have I done something wrong? You're being really rude. Yeah. And it's all that subtext underneath it. Whereas if you had a better understanding of other people, you can see, oh, you're someone who just needs me to get straight to the point, and then you can relax and get into it. And vice versa. Oh, this is someone who needs me just to ask about them. So we'll get into that as well.
Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much. See, I learn every time I get somebody on here. But that's the thing. I like asking questions about things I don't really understand. And that's kind of how we learn, I guess, isn't it? It's another form of communication. I do listen to people as well. It's always a bonus. Now I noticed on LinkedIn, you have an accelerator or next intake coming in for an accelerator in February, which I believe this is going out at the end of February. So right now there's an accelerator intake. Tell us about it. What's it all about?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that had people coming to me. So I used to do a lot of training, and last year I actually obtained my accreditation as an ICF coach, which is a lot about leading, exactly what we've been talking about, leading people to their own way of doing things. And the accelerator came about. I did a huge research survey. I spent a lot of 2020 and 2021 collecting data and information from financial services businesses and fintechs about what was going wrong in their business. And a lot of it was what we just said. First of all, low professional confidence. That is because when you go through all of the examinations and training in accountancy and finance, it's very technically focused, which is great, but then you get released into the wild and you have to deal with people. And then, especially if you go to management route, and then you're dealing with much more people. And of course, the Big Four, they do have a lot of programs, and they invest a lot in coaching and people development. And as you know, and they see the value in that. And that is something that needs to be a lot wider, I feel, as well. So first of all, it's the lack of confidence dealing with people. You can be instinctively good at it, and then those people become managers. But it means you're losing a lot of talent because just simply they haven't been taught how to communicate effectively in their own style. We also we actively build EQ points throughout the program. So again, going in line with what's actually needed in that space from being in a technical field. And then communication skills. So the speaking, data storytelling, be able to look at the data and actually not just say it in your head, but converse it to someone else who's not very financially or data focused. So I put that all together in 5 steps, so during the program, we go through self-awareness. So again, just dig deep into who you are, how you communicate, what your blind spots are, and then how you manage those emotions. So what are your trigger points? Where is your confidence lowest? What are we going to do to get you to combat that in the future? And what personalities also bring out your trigger points? Again, I'm going to say, I don't want to say weaknesses, but who makes you feel inferior or insecure? Because that does happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And why? Why does that happen? What is it about that person? So usually it's a type of person. It's not a specific person. It's something that's flagging up in the background. So that's the first one. The second one is what I called allied conversations. So it's learning to have, especially as a manager and a leader, it's learning to have conversations that are supportive, that are to an end point, that are goal driven. So it's very much, we go through some coaching methodologies and coaching skills and frameworks, but also some different tools and techniques to make sure that you're always in control and you're positively influencing others in the way that you're talking and managing those difficult conversations. Values, because values, I think, are behind everything. Seriously, it blows up everything for everyone when they realize that they're living a life that isn't actually in tune and it's not really important to them anymore, which is why we've had the Great Resignation. Not everyone quitting their jobs. They went, oh, hey, I don't really want to do this anymore. which we, as you said, everyone has that moment when you're going, oh, what am I doing this for? Which happened to me, happened to you.
All the time. It still happens.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's funny you said that, because actually I think I was misleading in the fact that it was a car crash. It wasn't that it was a life and death situation, because weirdly I've had a few near-death situations. It wasn't that. It was just like there was this silence of, it was a really bad crash, but it was also, I was super lucky, and I was just like, well, what was the point of that if I'm just going to go on?
Yeah, I don't think that's misleading at all. I think actually it's the emotional impact of anything, if nothing else, not necessarily the physical kind of impact. Anything can happen, and it can spur you into action.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wasn't interested personally in being in living a life that was mediocre by my terms, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, anyway, so values is very important, is understanding actually what really matters. And if you can't say right now the 3 things that really matter to you, what your values are, and no one can say integrity, because that's a cheat. Everyone wants to say that one, especially if you work in finance.
It's usually just a team name on The Apprentice, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah. So it's a sticker on a wall somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
On your website. No, you can't say that one. So if you cannot say right now 3 things that really, really matter to you, then it's something you need to think about, because those drive your decisions, they drive your behavior. It's a very important part of your psychology.
Wow.
Very determined about that.
Yeah, to blow my mind. I was thinking, like, genuinely, I'm screwed.
You're trying to think, what are your 3?
Yeah, exactly.
What are your 3? Can you name them? Or would I pick
do you know, I genuinely don't think I could off the top of my head. I'm very much an in the moment kind of person, and I find that maybe even too changeable from depending on how I am today is how I feel and how driven I am and what drives me. And then tomorrow it could be something completely different. Kind of like a magpie syndrome, I think. So I do need to define actually what that is as a kind of a, maybe even like a daily mantra in terms of what I need to go for.
Could be like a digging down thing. That's the thing. So
nice exercise to do, though, wouldn't it? I mean, as you know, I work a lot mostly in the mental health space. I'm looking forward to speaking to your community very soon as well, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to recognise with the mental health stuff that when you're in it, you don't tend to think about so much about what you're actually doing yourself, like physician heal thyself kind of thing. You deliver and you don't tend to kind of think too much about your own stuff. That's a really good tool because a lot of these things may seem quite heavy to confront. When you said that seemed really impactful, but actually it's really exciting to think that you've got like a fresh, clean slate of sheet of paper. What are your 3 things? That's an amazing exercise. I like that.
It's a really good one, and it really helps if you're stuck making not just decisions, but you're feeling this sense of a bit like you're living a life that's quite vague, or having a career path that's you're not quite sure, something's not quite right and you can't put your finger on it. That's a really good way to go into it and have a think. And it is, I mean, it's super powerful because you can think, does this actually, it's like a scorecard, does this actually fulfill my need to do this, or my belief that this is important and this is how I want to live my life? And they can be really powerful. And I think I love what you said about leading, like it can be quite deep and quite challenging, but think of it this way: we can only take our work and take other people as far as we're willing to push ourselves. So
nice. I'm getting far more quotes out of this session than I thought I was ever going to get. It's kind more into a kind of a coaching session. This is really cool. Thanks, Alex. Invoice in the post.
There you go. So the last 2 then is the last one is express. So, but after all that, it's you're expressing ideas. So then I go into using voice and storytelling techniques. So taking people on a journey and crafting information in a powerful way, how to stand, how to speak, how to have stage presence, and deal with that. And then the final one is actually success skills. And that's because you can do all of that work, but unless you're actually embedding powerful habits to change you from who you were to who you want to be, then there's no point. You have to then actively, throughout that whole process, think what's standing in my way from who I want to be to do what I need to achieve. And so it's about forming those much more powerful habits to make you happier and healthier.
Wow. Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So like literally this time's flown by, but I do want to, that was one question I did want to ask you, because I know it's something that you're passionate about, kind of being even an influencer in actually in the field, is emotional intelligence. You see it banded around as this kind of hashtag or as a term. And what does it actually mean? What's your definition of what is emotional intelligence?
I think that's a really great question, because you're totally right. And there are several definitions about emotional intelligence. I think emotional agility is probably my preferred way of talking about it, because it's about understanding how the emotions affect your brain. And I've been studying neuroscience the past year, and we have this whole other section of our brain that we don't know how to use. We don't understand it. We think it's very instinctive. And that's the thing. We can actually control and affect our thinking by reframing things. So emotional intelligence, or agility, as I call it, is about, first of all, recognizing what your emotions are and being able to name them. And I just do this with my son on a basic level. He has a book called The Color Monster, and you can see if he's little one. And you can see if he's in a world of being overtired and overwhelmed, and he's on the floor because I won't let him have a chocolate bar at 6 o'clock before bed.
That's harsh.
I know, last night. even my husband was just going, Mummy said no. But you can see him not coping, like, and he doesn't know he's almost like he doesn't understand what's happening. But we still do this as adults as well, or we don't understand how our behavior impacts other people and situations. And when that suddenly becomes a huge boardroom meeting, that's a big deal. Not to say it isn't anywhere else, but when you're leading other people, it affects other people so much in a greater level. So it's about them regulating those emotions. And when I say regulating, if you can name it, then you can start to distance. You can see it almost in your head, like what just happened, rather than just being at the mercy of your emotions. So with my son, I'll say, which color monster are you right now? And you can see him pause. It's almost like he goes, oh, right, I'm going to stop having my tantrum. I'm going to think about that. And he does. And usually that anger, he goes, and you can see it soften. And he goes, I'm blue. And that he's recognizing it's not anger that's underneath, it's sadness. And then at which point we go, right, now how do we get to green, which is calm, or yellow? And he can mentally make a path and choose where he needs to be and help himself get there, and help himself what he needs to get there as well. So it's a very simplistic way of looking at emotional intelligence, but equally we've never been taught to do these things or to identify emotions, and from a mental health basis is super important. And the other thing I feel passionately about, I'm going to throw in there, is that I feel that this is a really huge reason why we have some great female leaders out there, because we've from birth been told how to be nurturing and supportive, and also to keep our emotions in check, whereas men have traditionally, and male suicide is the highest, are told never to share anything and never to talk about their emotions, and because of that conversation, the detrimental effect it's just mind-blowing.
Absolutely powerful point to finish on. Thank you. Wow. So quickly, because it's flown, but you're definitely coming back for a future episode for sure. What about when you're not being the professional Alex Bond-Burnett? How do you recharge? How do you get your energy back? What do you enjoy doing?
Oh, do you know what? I love cooking and singing. I still do sing.
Nice.
So, yes. Singing while cooking, that's the best.
That's the dream. Yeah, well done you. We'll keep on keeping on. So the question I ask everybody that comes on the show, and it'll form part of a playlist that'll be available at the end of the season, is this. I am now the MC of the O2 Arena in London. 20,000 people paid their hard-earned money to come and hear you speak. 20,000 people. You're kicking back in the green room with your feet up on the table, sipping a Prosecco, and I'm just about to announce you to the stage, and your walk-on music kicks in. That song that motivates you, that lifts you, that gets you at peak state. Alex Bond-Burnett, what would your track be and why?
My track, and I hope you add this on at the end.
I will. Whatever it is, I promise.
is The Power of Love by Huey Lewis.
Tune.
Yes.
What an absolute tune. I'm so pleased that's going on the playlist. Keep your eyes peeled, everybody. Or your ears peeled. This is going to be a great playlist at the end of the season. And eclectic, after our kind of trance music from Francois last week from South Africa, it's going to be an eclectic playlist, but very, very enjoyable. So, Alex Bond-Burnett, big round of applause.
Oh, thank you to you. Thank you for having me.
Absolute amazing guest. Thank you so much for giving up your busy time to be with us today. Really appreciate that. Everybody else, that's a wrap. Next Monday, I have another amazing guest to bring you. So please stay tuned and hit like and subscribe and love and all that kind of stuff, what you can do nowadays. And yeah, in the meantime, stay well, be happy, and take care. I'll see you next Monday. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Do hit the like button and subscribe to stay tuned for future episodes. Published every Monday and available through YouTube or the podcast platform of your choice. See you next week.